Hello, thank you so much for having me today. I'm really excited. Thank you, Ben. Like he said, I'm a fourth-generation steward of Foxhollow Farm. We're a biodynamic farm community in Crestwood, Kentucky, so not too far. Come visit us. So living and working on a farm is filled with beautiful moments. There's a reason we have #FarmLife. And so every morning I get up and I see the sun rise, and it's just breathtaking. I love when my feet are in the soil and I can feel the vitality of the land. But also, I want to share some other sides of farm life. This is my husband and I, and our first two ducks, Dilly and Bean. So Dilly is on the right with my husband. You can see that smile on his face. Well, actually, when I brought them home and they started pooing all in the bathtub, he wasn't smiling. That's not the flip side, but that's just part of it. So Dilly followed me everywhere. She loved me, and I loved her. She thought I was her mama. So one day, she was in the garden with me when she was really little, and she was like waddling around the edge, and she fell off. Broke her foot, and I thought she was going to be fine. We made this teeny-weeny little splint for her. We would wrap it every day. She still would sort of like try to follow me around the garden, and as she got bigger and bigger, I could see that she was more and more miserable. Her foot was hurting so bad that she couldn't venture throughout the farm like she wanted to, and she was in pain. So any of you who are sensitive to the circle of life, earmuffs. So this is what happened. I had to make a decision and make sure that I was doing the right thing for the farm and the right thing for Dilly. I went to the back of my barn and had to cut her head off. This is Miles. This is a happier story. That totally dropped. Sorry, guys. So this is Miles. This is my year-and-a-half-year-old son. He is the joy of my life. He makes farm life so fun because literally everywhere he's like, tractor, ride, and it's just so fun. So we go on these ATV rides. He calls them rides. And the other day we were going on a ride. I'm not going to tell you who was taking him, but we went on a ride to visit the cattle, and he comes back, gets off the ride, goes around back, and grabs the exhaust pipe. That's also farm life. So he burnt his hand. It was terrible. Benton was so sweet and took him to the hospital. And he has so much health and vitality. Little kids can bounce back so quickly that he's fine now. But that's really what it is like on the farm. So I didn't grow up on a farm. My mom would take us out to the farm growing up, and I remember never really seeing many farmers because I don't come from a long line of farmers. I would see these old men in ginormous tractors, but I never saw anyone really like down in the ground respecting and looking at the earth. And so, not growing up on a farm, I lived this life in the city, and it was a lot different than my life is now, but also I really appreciate the creativity and the life in the city has to offer. I do come from a long line of strong, confident women, and they were all inherently ahead of their time. And so I'm very thankful to those women. Up in this corner is my great aunt. She purchased the original manor house with her husband in the 1930s. They didn't have any children, so the farm was passed down to my grandmother. At that point, it was a dairy, and they leased the farm out to a dairy farmer. My grandmother ended up having to lease the farm out again to someone else because dairy farming in the 80s became just a very, it was not a viable business for farmers. And so my grandmother leased it out to a 3-crop rotation farmer. Now, how many of you know what 3-crop rotation farming is? Okay. So those of you who don't know, it's wheat, corn, and soybeans rotated throughout the seasons. And usually they're doused in chemicals like you can see here in this plane, and they're GMOs. So it wasn't ideal. My grandmother was very into health and healing, but she just couldn't fathom taking on that 1,300-acre farm herself, and she didn't really see another option. In fact, the reason I have the picture of this plane was to remind me to tell you this story, but so she would run out the door, and when the planes would come by, and she would just like wave her arms in frustration. I remember hearing this story from my mom, and she just didn't know what to do. She was really frustrated by the fact that chemicals were on the land. My grandmother got Alzheimer's when I was 15 years old. It quickly progressed, and by 2005, it was up to the next generation, my mom, aunt, and uncle, to decide what to do with our 1,300-acre farmland. Now I'm going to back up a little bit. My great-grandmother introduced the work of Rudolf Steiner, a philosopher, to my mom, aunt, and uncle. Steiner is the founder of the biodynamic approach to agriculture. So converting the farm from a chemical 3-crop rotation farm to a method that would heal the land, like biodynamic farming, took about 1 phone call between my mom, aunt, and uncle. They all agreed, and my mom led the charge. She was fearless. At least that was what it seemed like when she would call me and just be so excited about the project and have this vision that was addictive. So she brought out biodynamic farming consultants, and about 4 different consultants came, and they all agreed that cattle were key to healing our land. Not only would they aerate the soil with their hooves, but they would mow for us, and they would naturally fertilize as they rotated. So it's July 2006, one of the hottest days in summer, and we welcomed our first 30 head of cattle. They started rotating the land, and at that point, I was in Boone, North Carolina, studying business management and entrepreneurship. My mom sent me a book when I was in college, The Omnivore's Dilemma. That book changed my life. It goes through the harsh realities of the industrial food system, but also it highlights a farmer that's respecting the land, respecting the animals, and feeding his community. I was hooked. I was inspired. I remember going to the cafeteria after reading that book and thinking I could eat nothing. Everything was tainted. Everything to me was just like tortured animals, tortured meat. And so, luckily I lived in Boone, North Carolina, and they had great farmers markets. So I took myself to the farmers market, I shopped, I met the farmers, and I started cooking meals for my friends. So my senior year of college, I wrote the business plan, the original business plan. It's a living, breathing plan for Foxhollow Farm. And I graduated, went home, and decided I was going to stick around. It was pretty ideal, right? You saw in the beginning. So a lot of you, or some of you, how many of you have heard of biodynamic farming? Okay, wow, you all are an educated crowd. Good job. So biodynamic farming is like organic on steroids. It doesn't have any of those harsh chemicals, or as my mom says, the sides, the pesticides, the herbicides. It looks at the whole farm as a living, breathing organism. It takes all the different elements of the farm, the forest, the fields, the soil, the plants, the animals, the people, the community, and it makes sure it's this gorgeous balanced system, because if one of those is off balance, you all know that that can kind of tilt. That can kind of throw everything else off. So biodynamic farming is a lot of physical work. It's physical labor. If farming was easy, more of us would be doing it. But it also takes observation and contemplation. Biodynamic farmers walk their land and they observe. They listen. Biodynamics is this dynamic, balanced system. So what if we nurtured and supported our whole systems like a biodynamic farmer does her land? What if we took the time to look at all the different elements of our lives, our careers, our family life, our friends, ourselves, our mind, our body, our spirit, and we decided to nurture it and find balance? Maybe that's what will allow us to thrive. So earlier this year, I took some time to find balance. I honestly spent a lot of time with these guys. I observed, I listened, and I was open to change. I looked at my whole life, not just my career life, but I spent more time going to lunch with friends. I spent time with my family. I spent time in the woods, and it all started to come together. It came together when I focused on the aspects of my craft that made me feel enlivened. For me, balance looks a lot like this. I'm cooking and enjoying meals with the people I love. I visit with mentors. I truly enjoy my garden and have time to be there, and I make time for myself as well. I also happen to love my career, so I work, and I work purposefully. I have time to manage the day-to-day tasks, but I also have time to look to the future, to the bigger picture of why I'm doing this. Stewardship. I call myself a fourth-generation steward of the farm because good stewardship is why I'm doing this. I'm building a business model that can last for generations and support our community. I want to prove that farming well, and by well I mean healthy for the animals, for the land, for the consumers, for you guys, the people eating the food that we're raising. Farming well can also be profitable. It can allow farmers to stay on their land and farm, and it can give young farmers hope. Aspiring young farmers give me hope. And so I work every day for the future. I really respect the history of my land, the history that my family has given me, but I also work every day for the future generations. So I want you to think about this. How are you going to leave your mark? What is your craft stewarding? So I've been working on building Foxhollow for 12 years, and I have not always had balance. In fact, one year I planted a big bush in my market garden because I didn't want to take a break to go pee. Now that is not balance, and I know it's not sexy either, and I can't believe I just told that story. It's not even in here. So anyway, I'm obsessed with my craft. I love every element of it, and there was one point where I became too obsessed, and I'm going to tell you a story about a time that was hard. So I was actually fired by my aunt and uncle once. Now don't worry, I'm still a fourth-generation steward, and we've worked those kinks out, but it was an example of being too obsessed with my craft and having no balance. I was so caught up in how wrong the conventional beef industry was that I couldn't articulate what we as a family were doing to fix it. I couldn't articulate the viability of our business. It looked a lot more like this. Ah! It was bad. Okay, so can you imagine being fired by your family? You've got to do something pretty outlandish. And it's kind of like being fired by your investors. Don't freak out in front of the people who are supporting you. Trust me. So, to be honest, I deserve to be fired. I lived in this bubble where I thought everyone was obsessed with where their food was coming from. I remember seeing this episode of Portlandia where the couple ordering the chicken is asking every last detail about that chicken and thinking, see, look, everyone's obsessed with where their food comes from. I realize how ridiculous that is. Now, I don't want you to think, oh, poof, I take time off, I find balance, and just watch the business grow. It was tough. And Foxhollow Farm is still developing and evolving. It will always require observation, creativity, contemplation. Foxhollow's grass-fed beef and our events are killing it. I'm so proud of it, and it takes a lot of marketing and a lot of adaptability and an incredible team. Thankfully, I love my farm and know that Foxhollow is crafting something bigger than the day-to-day hustle. Now, I had to quote Wendell Berry. I'm a Kentucky farmer. So it may be that when we no longer know what to do, we have come to our real work. And when we no longer know which way to go, we have begun our real journey. Now after this, well, really after this, I'm going to go enjoy some lunch with some girlfriends. But then after that, I'm going to head back to the farm, go visit the cattle just for fun and to see the adorable little calves. I'm going to pick some chamomile in my garden and hike in the woods with my family. All the things that my spreadsheets and business plans say will not lead to success. But I know that those are the things that allow my craft to shine. And I encourage you to take the time to look at your whole self, to look at your whole life and find balance, because when you do, your craft will shine. Thank you.
We have a few minutes for some questions, and so be thinking about questions, and I'll run a mic out there to you. I'll kick it off.
Okay.
I'm curious, as a farmer, craft, you guys do so many events out at the farm. Like, what's one thing that kind of stands out that gives you life in like being a farmer? Like, you just, like, this one thing, I just love doing it, and it's just like gives you so much life and like helps you to move forward each and every day at the farm.
My favorite thing to do is...
Probably not the duck.
Not the duck part. Yeah, I'm shocked by how many times I've had to do that, actually. I think my favorite thing about the farm, this is a hard one. Okay, so it's either the woods. I love visiting the woods, and we have this gorgeous waterfall on our farm. But also, my son and I have been taking a ride to the pastures, and we just literally park it, and all the cattle come like surround you, and there's all these little babies. That's really fun. That's amazing.
Hi, can you talk briefly about how you ethically process all of your meat? Because obviously that's what you're selling and that's what your business is.
Yeah, definitely. So that's a big part of the business. So we have this incredible mom and pop shop called Memphis Meats. They're in Memphis, Indiana. And they do all our processing for us. I don't know how much detail you meant. But anyway, so they are this family business. And when I went and visited, they care so much about our animals. Our cattleman takes the animal to the processor. And it's only about a 20-minute drive. We're really careful in getting the animals in because we don't want to stress them out at all. And when we get there, we lead them out, and they go one by one. They don't see each other in line or anything like that. And when you go watch this process, you get this incredible respect for the animal, and it just makes me feel like I know I'm doing the right thing. Like, I love to eat meat, and I feel like part of my responsibility as someone that eats meat is I need to understand that side of it as well. And so I've really gotten interested in butchering recently, and it's an art, and it's a lost art, and it's an incredible creative process that I'd love to highlight more, and I hope someone out there wants to be a butcher one day, because it's a really gorgeous art.
So, I'm familiar with farming. It's in my family. But there's a lot on your plate, and also you're like a mom and whatnot. So, I think you shared a lot about like prioritizing your real life, and that's really important to me. But as someone with a lot on your plate, like how do you, I think, establish those priorities and like make time to go take a hike and so on and so forth?
Yeah, that's a great question. In the beginning of this year, I literally put it in my to-do list and I put it in my calendar. Like, I would get an alert that was like, go outside. And now I've found that like doing this presentation, I would not have gotten through this. I was nervous, guys. I'm not going to lie. This is a little intimidating. Doing this, I would step outside and just for 10 minutes go do something outside, and then when I came back in, I was so much better. And so I just started to naturally understand how much that brought to me. And one thing that I think was the best thing I did to find balance is I just started scheduling meetings with people I respected in the community and with mentors. And that, you schedule that in, so you have to go do it. But every time after one of those meetings, I'm always coming back with new inspiration or new ideas. So.
Awesome. Thanks.
Hey.
Hey, I mean, you're absolutely adorable. Like, you personality is like so big and whatever. Plus, anybody who can pull off the first story and keep going is awesome too.
Thank you.
So, but my question is basically, you talked about how you kind of were going in multiple different directions and stuff, and then you ended up kind of finding your passion, I guess. And I mean, how exactly it sounded like they would have both intertwined, but also gone in totally different directions.
Yeah, so in my business, you mean? Yeah. So in the beginning, I was 21 when I started, so like I thought everything was possible. I was just like, boom, 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 let's do everything. And then I honestly just think I started to realize that there are certain things, well, one, I don't have time to do everything. And then two, there were certain things that were definitely shining. And when I really honed in on looking at the future and what the vision was for the farm and what I wanted the future to look like, it made me only do things that got us towards those goals. And so I feel like I said yes to everything. And now I don't. I mean, I know that the events are connecting people with the land, and that's a big part of our mission. And so I try to make sure those events are wholesome and true to the farm. And then with the beef, I just had to make a really tough decision with that one. I've always been super hyper local, and recently we started shipping nationwide, and literally that took me a year to be okay with that. And it also is still scaring me because I feel like I'm giving up on our community, but you have to make decisions for your business that you know will make it so your business can last, and had to adapt with the time. So I'd like to try a lot of things, but making sure they're really in line with our mission and our vision, and then really in line with the fact that if you try it and it's not working, stop. And that's something I think used to take me a lot longer.
Let's take a round of applause for Maggie Keith.